Hi everyone, welcome to another episode on how to make a casual shoe. I remain your aspiring footwear professor, Peter Shalom Gebe. In this very section, we'll continue from where we stopped earlier. We're looking into the closing and assembling. So this very section will be demonstrating how to fold our upper and as well attach our lining, then stitch our upper together. We will now have our upper ready for the next process, which is lasting and making. In our previous video, we were able to demonstrate how to attach the back strap and the other component. In this very segment here, you'll discover that I'm using a different upper, which is the brown upper, while the previous one I used a black upper which have a reinforcement. But in this one, we'll be using an upper that does not have a reinforcement because of its thickness. So it's just to demonstrate how you attach your lining, how you fold and attach your lining rather. That will now have a perfect upper ready for lasting. So let's continue with the work for the day and see how far we'll go. Now we're going to apply adhesive on the edges, then fold it just as our pattern was reflecting the folding allowances, which is 5mm folding allowance. As you can see, I'm focusing on the edges where the adhesive will take over. That's from only the parts that I'll be folding, so that I should not go over as when I will be attaching the lining as well. It's just the important key point. I'm applying the adhesive so far. If you've not subscribed to this channel, do well to click on the subscribe button and also on the notification bell as you receive notification on our content on how to make shoe to foster your journey in the shoemaking industry. So now as you allow it to dry, it's time to fold. If you notice, you discover that you are folding on the folding allowance line. You're folding it downward, okay? That is why you perforated those lines to indicate your folding allowance, make it more easier for you. But in the situation whereby you are using a press cut, you might not have that line available. You might have a folding machine who can do this, but this is a process on making it with your own hands. That was why you have those allowances to show. And on this very part here, anywhere there is a cuff, it is more easier for you to use a needle or a pin, something that is just like a pin, and fold edges. It will make it more simple for you because you find it difficult folding those areas. So just leave those areas and use a pin to press them from the edges of the line. You have a perfect folding of your cuff side. Okay, so folding makes it more easier. Remember, before folding you skived it, and to make it look neat and smooth, not having a bumpy edges on your shoe. In this very project, what I use in folding those areas is not what we call a pino. Just know that what I actually use is a piercing tool. It's a piercing tool that we use in piercing holes. It's more of like an awl, okay? So that's what we use, a piercing tool to do the folding. That is a tool I use. But some people can use even scissors, can use all, but it's just how well you can use to get those small curve. The tinier it is, the easier it creates a curve for you. That is just the essence of it. Some use needle to do that, but the most important thing is to get that curve perfectly made, since you're not using a folding machine to do that. Now we're done with the folding. You can choose to hammer it, or you can just leave it. In this case, I actually don't have a problem with to hammer it on. So now this is the lining. You turn the lining upside down, because the inner part of the lining is what you want to see. That is the brown part, is the inner part of the lining. Turn it upside down so that you now attach them in. Okay, so you rub adhesive on the edges as well. The purpose is it's not a permanent adhesive yet. That's the final adhesive yet, because you have room for your stiffener to come in. You also have room for other things that you might be doing before lasting, so that you can even be able to repair when necessary. So here now, you rub adhesive on those edges all through, and do the same with the upper. Then we'll now go into the attaching. I'll show you how to do the attaching carefully. There are different ways. Some people have their own methods of doing it, but in this one I demonstrate a very simple method where you can easily get it done without stressing yourself. The most important thing, so far your patterns are right, you have your patterns perfectly cut, you won't have problems with this. Remember the allowances you give, but for beginners I'll advise you to add extra allowances whenever you're cutting your material, even with the patterns you and the allowance rather you have on your pattern. Still, when cutting your material, you can increase a little bit allowance, so that you be sure and confident of the allowances. But in my case, I perfectly use the patterns and the allowances rather I use, and it fits in perfect, because I understand what I'm doing and I believe in what I'm doing. So in this demonstration, you will see how I attach mine, and it perfectly fit well. We call the allowances the trimming allowances, okay, because those allowances, when you attach for the lining, you will now have to trim them off. So I will show you how to go about the attaching right away. Let's allow these ones here to dry. Then let's pick the former one. It have already dry, at least not it's okay rather. So now what I just did now is to fold it from the main position, that's the center point of it, from the back part, and I started my attaching from the back part. Some you can start from the front part if you're perfect, or if you're very good at what you're doing. So just carefully on the edges, okay, you see, you set it, you discover that there is an error a little bit, so I have to readjust. Come back to the other side of it carefully. With those allowance, you can see it just fits in easily. But in the case whereby you are trying to do that, it's not fitting, just try and follow suit. The allowance match the front and the back parts together. You have everything set. So this is how I go about attaching my lining. Remember, the adhesive you added was only on the edges, okay, so that it can facilitate your attaching carefully. You can see my 3mm allowance hanging at the edge of the upper for the lining. Do the same with the second one, in to in, remember, okay, in to in. Now let's go to the back part again. Sorry, I didn't notice that my video was actually cutting on this very part. So here you go carefully on the edges. Let's go again. As you can see, I'm using those allowances that I measured for the lining. Set it from the front part as well. You have a perfect fit. Just a little bit, you might be getting some creases. You have to be careful. You see, perfect. Now the next thing is to go and stitch our upper. There is what we do whenever we're making our pattern. We do indicate the in and the out, but on a casual shoe like this, it's a very simple casual shoe that both parts can go on, so you won't have a problem to check the inner part. So but on my stitching now, I have to indicate where my inner part is. I'm going to stitch. My stitching will always start from the inner part. It is advisable that any kind of shoe you're making, anything that has to be with stitching or joining your either your welt, you always start on the inner part, okay? So also it is on the upper. I'm starting my upper from the inner part. As you can see now, the stitching here starts from the side on the inner part of the shoe. That is what I use. So it automatically, it means that this very part I start my stitching should be on the inner part. That means it's a left fit I am making currently, okay? So let's stitch the edges of our upper and make sure it fits perfectly. Now I'm carefully stitching the edges using my industrial sewing machine. If you don't have an industrial sewing machine, you can use your manual sewing machine. It could be any of the products. There are many products, though in Nigeria the popular product is always butterfly. You can have Singer, you can have Sparta and the rest, but when making use of such machine, make sure they are strong enough to stitch your upper, okay? Because there are ways where they are being used, because most of them are actually for fashion, but you can convert them to be for your shoe making as well, with the change of needle and some tension, some little work done on it, so that it can be stitching your shoe making upper material. So now I just finished stitching the edges of the upper, as you can see. Now let us go into the second part. You discover that now it has changed, the direction have changed. Why? I have the inner part and the inner part to be stitched. The previous one I started from the tongue I moved towards the tongue rather, but in this case I'm stitching now backwards before going around towards the tongue, because I'm indicating my inner part of the right leg instead. So the direction of your stitching is important. When stitching, you don't place your material on the larger material on the inner part, but instead you place the larger material on the outer part, so that your needle can be visible easily and you can determine the stitch length, and rather the stitch spacing of your needle. Then you will now be able to stitch properly. If your material is larger on the right hand side, you find it difficult to use it. You will not have enough room to stitch, okay? So that is what you note when stitching your upper. As you can see, the tiny part of the upper is on the side where the needle is, so that you can stitch well. So having done the stitching, we'll now move into what we call the trimming of the upper material. Trimming the upper material is another key thing that we're going to look into right away. Now I'm about to start the trimming. First thing I do is to reopen those edges. Remember, we apply adhesive so it could stick together and will not have a good trimming. I have a way of doing my trimming rather, but I will not advise you to. If you are not good at using your scissors, I trim from the inner part outward. As I trim, if you are not careful, you might end up cutting your threads. Okay, so just trim the excess material off. It's a good thing to do, and you are good to go with your lasting and making. So let's just trim them off, every bit of it, so that we can have a clean upper ready for lasting. So this is how far we can go for today, and don't forget to click on the subscribe button if you have not subscribed to this channel, and also click on the notification bell as we keep you updated with our great content and teach you how to make shoe from the comfort of your home. I tell everyone you can learn anything online so long you follow the basic instructions given to you and you make practice of what you are being taught. You'll have a great product and you'll be able to make exploit in the field of shoemaking. I've been in the shoe business for long. I could tell you what some of the nitty-gritty of what we do in the field of shoe making. So if you remember, I told you we are working out on two uppers. This is the brown one. That is the one that does not have the reinforcement. We made that previous one before this one. That's the black one before making this one. Now I'll be trimming that one as well. I have to keep that one because I lost the video. Actually, that was why I have to make this very one to compensate the video, and we should understand how to go about it. But in the issue of closing and assembling, I think we've already covered the aspect of reinforcement already. That's why I use this very one to show us how to attach the lining. It's the same thing so long you've added your reinforcement already. So let's trim it as well. All right, this is how far we can go for today. If you have any question, leave your questions on the comment section, and to those of you that are in the paid class, just do well, let us meet in the group chat and discuss more on making casual shoe from patterns and the upper making. In a subsequent video, we'll go into the lasting and making process, but we're going to see how to make the insole as well and how to go about the lasting and making step by step, as we always do. So this is how far we can go in our today's episode. I hope you learned something and have gotten value from what we have. I remain your aspiring footwear professor, Peter Shalom Gebe.